The group of people rose higher and higher, and the leader shouted to the others that there was only a little time left, so they needed to push harder to achieve their goal. And then a man with a red flag, which means he was the one who leads everyone, began to tell some guy to get up faster and not lag behind, because in such remote places people should always stick together for their own safety. It was clear how difficult it was for this guy, because not everyone can climb to the top of the mountain, because all people have different physical abilities, so you need to soberly assess your strength. The young man explained that he was trying, but if preparation is not enough, then effort alone will not get you far, so no matter how hard he tried, he could not catch up with the others. Little children, meanwhile, mocked the hero, saying that this was the weakest adult they had ever seen, because even though they were younger, they did not look tired at all, but, on the contrary, full of strength and desire to move on. Then the man turned to this guy, addressing him as Mr. Writer, and then asked why he couldn't cope, because even girls from elementary school were doing fine, unlike the young man. Then the writer explained that because of his profession, he leads a sedentary lifestyle, preferring to be at home rather than engage in any sports, which is why he got tired so quickly, because he was not used to being physically active. The hero remembered how comfortable he was at home, where he didn't have to strain, but could just lie on a soft bed and play games without spending a lot of strength and energy. It turned out that the young man was happy to lie under the air conditioner in his home with all the conditions for life. But it so happened that his editor dragged the writer to the mountains, which the hero himself was not particularly happy about. The young man was already dreaming of how he would punish the editor for such an act, and the punishment was that the writer would force him to reread his drafts, which seemed like an excellent revenge. And then the stick, which served as the only support for the young man to help him move, suddenly crunched with a characteristic sound, which was an unforeseen situation, because the guy believed in it too much to think that it could break. And due to the fact that the young man directed all his weight onto his support, as soon as it disappeared, which is logical, he himself was unable to stay on his feet, starting to fall. The guy realized too late what situation he was in, so he only had time to be afraid of his fall, but it was very difficult to do anything at the moment. The writer never found another support, because there was inadmissibly little time for this, so, without doing anything, the young man could not save himself, so he began to fall from a great height. Then he thought that, most likely, this is how his end will come. The young man extended his hand in the hope that there was still a chance to grab onto something, but he still understood that he could not escape, no matter what he did. He was on the verge of death, and as they usually say, his whole life flashed before his eyes, forcing him to think about what he was spending his life on, which is given to everyone alone. At that moment, the writer realized that instead of dreaming of power in another world, he should have looked at life more realistically, because not everyone can take off their rose-colored glasses, but sooner or later they were still destined to be beaten. The hero realized that he should have taken a more responsible approach to his life and not been distracted by all sorts of nonsense while working. But, unfortunately, he realized this too late. No one tried to help the young man, and it most likely would have been very difficult to save him, so he still began to fall from a high mountain, not knowing where it would lead him. The young man had to fall for a long time, because he was far from the ground, and now he was falling into the unknown, unsure that he could survive. When the hero fell from the cliff, he was able to open his eyes, and then realized that it turned out that he had survived such a terrible fall, which was a real miracle. And then the young man realized that he had not just fallen, because someone had managed to tie his hands with a rope in a strong knot, and it was not clear who did it and why. While the guy was recovering from waking up, he suddenly felt something drop on his forehead, so he decided to trace where this drop came from. Having gathered his strength, the hero looked up, and then he saw something that amazed him very much, so it was surprising how he had not noticed it before. And the young man noticed a girl who was drooling on him, and that is why something dripped onto the man, because the stranger was practically hanging over him. The girl was dressed very strangely, in something similar to the skin of a tiger, and her clothes did not look like what ordinary people wear, because they were sloppy and very revealing. The hero tried to reassure himself that she was also a human being, just like him, so she wouldn't eat him, but he couldn't believe in these words, so it was becoming more and more difficult to control himself and not scream. and then the stranger began to speak in her own language, which was incomprehensible to the writer, so he had no idea what the girl was saying about how tender his meat was. Although the guy hoped that they would not eat him, the savage, meanwhile, was thinking about how tasty it would be when she fried this man, imagining how juicy the meat would be if it was cooked correctly. The writer did not understand what the girl was talking about, but he still guessed that this would not end well, because it looked like he would soon become a steak. The hero began to think that, apparently, the heavens wanted him to suffer longer, and therefore he was not allowed to simply die from falling from a cliff, and now he will most likely be eaten. The stranger had already taken out her sword and with a hungry smile began to approach the young man closer and closer, continuing to drool. And now the guy already sees the weapon almost before his eyes, realizing that this time he will definitely not be able to escape, because it is difficult to come to an agreement with someone who is going to eat you. And then it turned out that the stranger wanted to use the blade not to cut the hero, but the rope with which his hands were tied, and she did this in order to free him, not to kill him. This act greatly surprised the writer, who already thought that the end had come for him and mentally said goodbye to his life, because he was sure that he would definitely be killed and eaten soon. And then the unknown woman said that although she was very hungry, even in this case she was not going to eat a person. When the hero realized that they were not going to eat him, then he finally decided to look at the stranger, who had very recently frightened him. And only then did he notice that the girl was not a simple person, because her ears were more like a cat's or another animal's than a human's. And then the man realized that the stranger not only had unusual ears, but what was also surprising was that she had a tail. Although the heroine resembled a person, talked and walked on two legs, but as it turned out, she was not a person. Then the young man thought that since he saw such a creature, then most likely he found himself in another world, because there could be no other options for events. The young man began to think that since he is a writer, so, in principle, he does not see anything strange in what is happening, but he was outraged by the fact that there are hundreds of interesting ways to die, and he got gravity. As a result, the hero decided that he needed to pull himself together and find out more about this place, because any information now would be very important to have a better chance of surviving in this unfamiliar world. First of all, the man looked around, trying to understand where he was now, because he was wondering where fate had taken him. The hero didn't really appreciate the interior of the room, concluding that the place he was in at the moment wasn't very good. The writer was accustomed to his cozy home with all the amenities, so what surrounded him at the moment seemed too impractical and old-fashioned. Having managed to get up, the hero noticed the light that was pouring out from the exit, so the guy began to walk towards this light. As a result, the young man decided to look outside to assess the situation and understand what the world into which he was so unexpectedly brought looks like. What the guy saw surprised him very much, because the first thing that caught his eye were two running creatures that looked like a fox and a bird, who seemed to be playing tag. Later he paid attention to other creatures that walked with spears and wore animal skins. It was then that the main character realized that he found himself in a primitive society, which was evident from his clothes, behavior, and dwellings. And then someone nearby began to say something, but the young man did not understand a word of everything he heard. Automatically, the writer turned around in search of the source of the noise, and what he saw scared him slightly. After all, he saw a tall man who asked about the name of the hero and where he would be from and why he came to the village of Yanlong, but the young man, of course, did not understand what they wanted from him. After that, the girl turned to this man, calling him Dad, and he evaporated her, saying that in front of strangers she should call him Captain. Then the heroine said okay, and then called the man Daddy again, which made him a little angry, because they weren't listening to him. And while the father and daughter were communicating, the hero stood rooted to the spot, because for him this language was unknown, so he simply did not know what to do and what was happening. Therefore, the young man was still hovering in his thoughts, thinking that he really found himself in a primitive society, which was something unimaginable. The stranger, meanwhile, asked the captain why this man was silent, and then concluded that it was her dad who scared him, to which the man himself replied that since this guy is gentle and subtle, then most likely he is from a large village. After this, the captain added that the shaman wants to look at the guest of their village, so they need to take the hero to him. While the heroes walked, the writer drew all eyes on himself, because he was unlike the others, which attracted attention, as usually happens. And the young man was thinking about where he had been taken, because in his world nothing like this could exist. Wherever he looked, there were tails and horns everywhere. The creatures, in turn, were surprised that the hero had no wings, no horns, no tail, and that the meat was so tender, without a single muscle, so he definitely didn't look like a fighter. The dwellings in this village looked very primitive, so even just from them one could say that the writer found himself in a primitive society. And this society was definitely not in the hero's native land, but since he is a writer, it was not so difficult for him to come to terms with rebirth, and although falling from a cliff was a boring method, it was quite rare. The question remained, what should the young man do next? And then he decided that the main thing was not to panic and watch everything carefully, because he definitely wouldn't be able to escape. The hero also remembered that there were animal bones lying everywhere, but there were no human bones there, which couldn't help but rejoice. And the creatures living in this place stared at the guy, more likely for scientific reasons, rather than for gastronomic ones, and even let him sleep, which means that they are definitely not cannibals, so nothing bad will happen to the hero. And then the commander said something to the young man. However, the young man once again did not understand anything, because this language was unfamiliar to him. It was clear that the hero did not understand anything, but the others still did not realize that it was useless to try to talk to him. Ignoring the incomprehensible expression on the guy's face, the man continued to say something, confident that he was understood. The hero began to wave his arms to show by his appearance that he did not understand a word. Then the man stopped trying to explain everything to the writer in words and simply pointed his hand in a certain direction. It turned out that the man pointed to a dwelling that was the largest and most beautiful in the entire settlement, so one could guess that someone of high position lived there. And then we find out that there lives a shaman who will not last long, and therefore he wants to find a new shaman for the creatures. But everyone in the tribe has already tried to pass the test, but no one has a talent for magic. Therefore, the creatures did not know what to do next, because if they did not find a new shaman, the tribe would die out, and then they remembered that of those who were not tested for magic, only a stranger remained, whom the creatures found 3 days ago. Therefore, the shaman ordered a young man to be brought to him so that he could try, because there were no other options left, so the writer was the only chance to save the tribe. It was because of this test that the hero was brought to the shaman so that he too could pass the test of magic. When the hero entered the dwelling, he noticed a man who was sitting in the middle, and the others stood around him, so the writer guessed that this man was most likely their leader. The shaman began to wave his hand beckoningly to the young man, and he, in turn, was surprised that their leader was calling him to him, wanting the writer to come up. Then the young man began to timidly approach the man, who continued to call him to him, although the guy did not know why he was being given such attention. The hero began to think that the old man looked weak, and if something went wrong, he would simply take him hostage to save himself, because he knew for what purpose he was being called. The writer slowly approached the shaman, not knowing what would happen next, and because of this he was nervous, ready to attack at any moment. The old man sat with his eyes closed and did not say a word, causing the young man to worry even more with his inaction, because the unknown is always frightening. And then the shaman suddenly opened his eyes, and the surprising thing was that a weak blue light was pouring out of them, thereby illuminating every wrinkle of the elderly man. This light captured the writer, and it happened so quickly and unexpectedly that the young man did not even carry out his plan to attack the old man if something happened. The young man felt as if he was falling. The whole room began to spin and begin to disappear, dissolving into the darkness. The dwelling finally disappeared from the hero's field of vision, and he began to fly in a space unknown to him, not knowing what was happening and what to do. The writer turned out to be the only accurate one, floating in this dark, mysterious nothingness, vaguely reminiscent of space. But he was definitely not in space, because he could breathe, and suddenly he began to be surrounded by fire, which literally came out of nowhere. The flame attracted the gaze of the hero, who looked at the fire without looking away, as if thanks to this he could learn something secret. And then it turned out that it was not just a flame, because someone's silhouette began to be traced in it, and then the young man realized that there was someone or something in the fire. At that moment, a shaman appeared next to the guy, who asked the young man if he saw this, without explaining what he meant, because he knew that the writer would understand him. And then the young man asked where the old man came from here, and then clarified where it was, because the guy still did not understand what was happening and why he began to understand the shaman's language. The old man explained that at the moment the heroes are in the depths of the writer's soul, and then added that now he will give the young man their language so that the guy can understand the others. And after that the shaman asked if the writer saw this, still without specifying what he was talking about. The young man, unsure whether he was being asked about this, said that there was either a dragon or a snake inside the flame, because the old man most likely asked about this, to which the old man simply replied that that was great. In reality, the writer was not in any unknown space, but continued to be in the room with his eyes closed, as if he was just sleeping, and then he suddenly woke up, abruptly opening his eyes and starting to look around, not fully understanding what had just happened. Next to him was a shaman, who raised his staff and shouted Subai. After this, the old man pointed to the writer and told him that the guy was now a resident of Yanlong village and was also becoming the next shaman. The writer noticed that now he understood a previously unknown language, and he was also very surprised that all these words were addressed specifically to him, because they pointed at him with a staff. This greatly surprised the commander, who did not expect that an ordinary stranger would become such an important figure as a shaman. This news struck not only the man, but also his daughter, who also saw and heard everything that happened. All the creatures rejoiced at the fact that they had a new manhwa, because it meant that their tribe would not die. However, among the joyful heroes there were those who were not very happy with the choice of the old shaman, because he chose some child in his place, and it was not clear whether he could replace the old man, but they still had no other options. And then the commander sided with the writer, saying that he believed in the choice of their shaman. And while everyone was discussing this news, the young man himself did not share the joy of the others, because no one even asked his opinion. The hero had just entered the new world when he immediately became a shaman, so he didn't even know what to do next, because it was all new to him. The writer was brought out of his stupor by the girl whom he saw first in the new world, and she grabbed the hero, dragging him somewhere with her. The guy did not resist and obediently followed the heroine, who persistently led him in an unknown direction. Others, meanwhile, were discussing the new shaman, saying that his name Subai was very strange, and they were also wondering what tribe he came from. And while some were discussing, others were simply glad that they had a shaman, which meant that nothing would happen to their totem. Thanks to the writer, everyone was happy that they would not become outcasts and would not disappoint their ancestors. And the young man still did not understand how he was suddenly made a shaman, and whether this was normal at all. And then the girl reassured the guy that the great shaman himself had chosen him, not someone else, but him. Then the heroine added that since the shaman said so, then this was the right decision, because one cannot doubt his decisions. The girl said this so confidently and enthusiastically that she even started pointing her finger at the guy, thereby reinforcing her statement. The heroine introduced herself as Manhwa, and then added that now she will keep an eye on the new shaman, so if he has any questions, he should not hesitate to ask them. It was clear that Manhwa was happy with the task that was assigned to her, as she was looking forward to the questions. Then the young man asked the girl to tell him more about the tribe, and she began to say that the tribe was called Yanlong, and their totem too, but she could not describe it, so when the time came, he would find out for himself. The writer guessed that what he saw in that fire was the Yanlong totem. After the heroine's story, the young man asked to tell him about the duties in the tribe. The hero himself noticed that the girl's father is the leader, but he listens to the shaman, so it turns out that the shaman takes the leading role. Manhwa was very surprised by this question, because what tribe is the guy from if he doesn't even know such things? Then the heroine explained that the shaman is the strongest person in the tribe, and the tribe cannot survive if it does not have a shaman. After the shaman comes the leader, who is the girl's father, and whose name is Yanku. And after the leader come the main hunters, who had incredible strength. The tribe also has totem soldiers, reserve soldiers and ordinary people. And then the guy noticed that although there are few people in this tribe, there are enough different positions. It was clear how this remark hurt the girl, and then she explained that before there were much more people in their settlement. Manhwa began to gather her thoughts to tell another story, but all the fun on the heroine's face disappeared. The story began with the fact that people from the Yanlong tribe used to live on fertile land left over from their ancestors, and then there was plenty of everything, including water and food. Then there was a source of water near the people, and they also never went hungry. In those days they were a huge tribe, because there were 300 of them, 65 of whom were strong soldiers. However, their happy life did not last forever, because 6 months ago they were attacked by the Black Snake tribe, and they devastated the hunting grounds of the Yanlong tribe, and many of its inhabitants died that day. But worst of all, the people lost their fertile land. Due to the fact that the heroes could not resist the Black Snake tribe, they had to move to the place where they are now. The girl confidently said that she must become stronger in order to save her comrades languishing in captivity, and then return the lands of her ancestors. While Manhwa was shouting that she would avenge everyone who died, the writer silently thought about everything that he had just heard. After this, the heroes recovered from their sadness, and went to inspect the surroundings so that the new shaman would know where he would now have to live. And although the tribe lost their fertile lands, it was clear that the heroine loved the place where they were currently staying. This is how the heroes spent their time while Manhwa showed the guy where everything was, because it was important for him to know all this. After the walk, the young man understood how things were and concluded that things for this tribe could not be worse. Almost all the residents are thin and pale, so it was clear that they clearly did not have enough food and were starving. There was negligibly little food per person, so everyone was malnourished, which was sad. It was also a problem that weather conditions coupled with lack of hygiene create an ideal environment for bacteria to spread. And if an epidemic starts, the consequences will be terrible and many will not be able to survive. The situation was so difficult that the new shaman did not even know where to start in order to somehow help the others. And then the guy heard some sound in ahead that said that it was loading the daily auxiliary system. Something actually started to load, and then a message appeared saying that the daily assistance system had been activated. The download was successful, so a sign with this system appeared in front of the young man. The hero thought that due to the fact that he is a writer, he knew that this would happen, because where without it, so he decided to try to control it using the power of thought, asking the system about what functions it has. Then the young man heard the functions currently available to him, after which the system said that he needed to check in every day to receive random beginner sets. Each time a hero is checked in, there is a small chance of receiving a medium set and a very small chance of receiving an advanced set. The monthly mark is guaranteed to produce an average set, and the yearly mark is guaranteed to be advanced. And while the system said that other auxiliary sets would open after the first year, the writer realized that there was not as much help as he expected. After all, the guy doesn't have a whole year to wait, because during this time the whole tribe will die of hunger. And then the young man stopped abruptly, because suddenly some thought came into his head. It turned out that the young man became interested in whether others could see the system interface. And then he learned that only the owner himself could see it. Then the writer turned his attention to the girl, who was indignant that they were not listening to her, and here she was talking about the tribe, but could have been training. And then the new shaman apologized, trying to get out of this situation, saying that he had not listened carefully because he was a little dizzy. However, this did not convince Manhwa, and she ordered the guy to remain silent, and then called him with her to take the young man to a place where he could rest. And then the heroine led the young man to one of the huts that were located in this settlement. After that, Manhua sat down near the tiger fur, which vaguely resembled a bed. The shaman asked if he would now live here, meanwhile looking around and realizing that this was not at all like the house in which he lived before. The girl seemed embarrassed by this question, and then timidly answered that maybe he would be better off here. The young man did not pay attention to the sudden change in the heroine's mood, telling her that he was very tired and would finally be able to rest. After that, the guy jumped onto this kind of bed, and didn't even notice that Manhua was not very happy about it. But then the girl came to terms with the fact that the shaman could not be stopped, so she simply continued to sit quietly. And then the writer smelled the tiger skin, and then realized that it smelled somehow strange. He ended up thinking it smelled a little like milk, so he liked it. At that moment, the heroine suddenly flew at the young man, shouting that he should not sniff the tiger skin and not touch anything here at all. The writer did not foresee such an impulse from the girl, so he was very surprised at how sharply she reacted to such simple actions. And then Manhua explained her reaction by saying that she was sleeping in the very place where the new shaman was now lying. After this confession of the girl, the writer began to think about all this, realizing that now the heroes are in an awkward position. It was clear that the situation had become tense, because it was felt in Yanhua's behavior. And since the heroine invited the guy to stay in her hut, this means that now they will have to live together. The young man was not embarrassed by the fact that the girl had horns and a tail, so he did not pay attention to them. All these features were offset by the fact that Yanhua had a body and face that looked very good in the writer's opinion. So, having considered all the pros and cons, the young man decided that he would still live with the heroine. The girl was outraged by this attitude towards herself, and also by the fact that the hero behaved as if he was being asked to live in this hut, and so Yanhua asked him who needed him to behave like that. After this, the heroine added that she still had to go on patrol tonight, so she was leaving, and then added that the writer should not touch her things, otherwise he would get hit on the head. And the young man was touched by how the girl swears at him, because even though she looks like an adult, she is very easy to embarrass. As soon as Yanhua left, the hero immediately decided that it was time for him to get down to business, so he told the system that he wanted to check in, to which he heard in response that the check-in was successful. Then the writer pressed the button for the first day, and the system began to say that he would soon receive a reward. The system congratulated the hero, because he received an average set of support, which included treatment, and then the guy thought that since he received the average set, it was luck, and then he thought about whether this was a guaranteed reward for the first mark. And then the young man decided to open the character panel and saw all his characteristics, including the name Subai, endurance of 0.7, strength and speed of about the same level, spiritual powers of level 2.1, work as a writer, and the recently acquired ability to heal the first level. Then the guy realized that his characteristics were SOSO, so this most likely would not be enough for him to survive in this cruel world, so he would need to take care of himself. Meanwhile, at such a late hour, light was pouring from the old shaman's hut, which meant that his tenant was not sleeping. It turned out that the old man at that time was sitting thoughtfully not alone, but with the leader of the tribe. In his hands the old shaman held something that most likely helped him in magic. And then the commander said that they did not know where Subai came from, so it was doubtful that he would really be able to become a shaman. And then the old man explained that they had no time left to choose, because none of their tribe owned magic, only a stranger who suddenly appeared. After his words, the shaman began to cough heavily, which greatly frightened the leader, who began to say that the old man needed to take care of his health and pay more attention to himself. And then the great shaman said that no matter how hard he tried to prevent this, he had no more than a couple of days left, so it was useless to try to do anything. It turned out that the man believed that the tribe had brought a lot of problems to the shaman, because if they were stronger, the old man would not have suffered during the raid of the Black Snake tribe. And then the shaman calmed the leader, telling him not to worry about it, because now there are much more important things. The old man asked the commander to hold the inheritance ceremony in 3 years. However, the leader doubted this, because it seemed to him that the old man was in too much of a hurry, because they did not know anything about Subai, and he might be from the Black Snake tribe. But the great shaman was sure that the Black Snake tribe could not raise such a kind and honest child. In addition, we should not forget that Subai was chosen as the new shaman after they looked into his soul, and there is simply no malice in the writer's soul. It is pure, like rainwater that has not yet reached the ground. The old man decided that Subai was most likely from a legendary tribe, so he needed to be protected until he decided to commit evil. And while the writer was being discussed, he himself slept soundly on his new bed, not suspecting anything. The great shaman was able to convince the leader that Subai was a good person, so the commander decided to begin preparations for the ceremony. Just as Father Yanhua was about to leave, the old man remembered something else that he wanted to tell. Then the leader received information that the descendants of shamans often inherit their abilities, so it would be better if the shaman had larger children. The commander assured the old man that he need not worry, because the man would do everything in the best possible way. And when the leader began to leave the dwelling of the great shaman, he noticed his daughter, who was sitting very close to the hut. The man realized that his daughter was most likely eavesdropping on the dialogue between him and the shaman throughout the entire time. Then Yanhua began to make excuses, saying that she was just on patrol, and therefore passed by, but did not hear anything. But after that, the leader reassured his daughter, telling her that it didn't matter to him whether she heard something or not, and then added that he had a very important task for Yanhua. The heroine was glad that her father finally recognized her strength, so she was ready for any task to prove that she could do everything. But the same joy was not visible on the commander's face as on the face of the still unsuspecting girl. And then the man told his daughter to become the young shaman's woman and bear him, the more the better. After hearing what she heard, the girl stared at one point with a surprised look, thinking about everything she had just heard. When the heroine understood everything, she began to scold her father, because they had already discussed the fact that Manhua would only marry a man who would be stronger than her. And this means that the young shaman has no chance at all, because he is skin and bones, so there is no way for him to win in a battle. Then the father began to swear in response, asking the heroine how many people she knew who were stronger than her, and then added that she would kill the poor fellow if she tried to fight him. Then, in a serious and calm tone, the man told his daughter to stop arguing, because she was already 19, so in any case it was time to have children, and at the same time it would serve the tribe. But it was clear that Manhua was not very happy about these words, and so she explained to her father that she did not care about children, because she wanted to become stronger and avenge her tribe. And then she added that if the commander wanted it that way, then let him marry the shaman himself. When the heroine shared her opinion about this whole situation, she quickly began to run away, and her father had to shout after her so that she would stop. The shaman silently watched this entire dispute, listening to everything that father and daughter were arguing about. The old man was surprised that the young people still had so much strength, and then thought that he would really like to see what would happen to this tribe next. And although the great shaman has very little time left to live, he will still try to do everything possible so that the tribe has a happy future. After the young shaman slept, and when he woke up, he had to crawl out of the hut. And all because the writer was very cold due to the fact that there was a real duck outside, and he was dressed very lightly for such weather. After this, the guy began to doubt that people live in these huts, because the buildings are full of holes and cracks. Because of this, the hero was so cold that he almost froze to death. The young man decided that something needed to be done about this, because this could not continue every night. Then Subai noticed that Manhua had returned, and so he asked her to bring more straw. It seemed that the girl was in no hurry to get the straw, continuing to simply look at the young shaman. Then she seemed to come to her senses, realizing that the young shaman had asked her for something. The dialogue with her father was still in the heroine's thoughts, so as soon as she saw the writer, she immediately imagined the many children that the leader asked her for. Unexpectedly for the young man, the heroine began to beat him and shout that she definitely wanted a bigger man. The young man did not understand what Manhua meant, so he asked her to bring straw again, thinking that she simply did not hear. It was then that the heroine finally realized the request, and so she asked why the guy needed straw. The young shaman explained that the girl had many holes in her home, so they needed to be repaired, and for this he needed straw. The heroine then understood what was the matter, and then said that so be it, she would help the young man. Then it seemed to the young man that the girl began to behave much worse, and he did not understand what was happening to her. Subai had no idea about the dialogue between Manhua and her father, so he continued to be confused, and even beaten. And then the young man noticed something that completely attracted his attention, forcing him to stop. It turned out that the young shaman saw people who were not even sleeping in a hut, but simply under something that looked like a canopy. These were very young creatures who curled up into balls, because they were very cold, and then the writer asked the heroine why someone was sleeping on the street, because they didn't even have anything to cover themselves with. Then Manhua explained that few people have a home, and the skins are very valuable, so everyone takes care of themselves, but the hero should not worry, because his life is much more important. It was clear from the expression on the young shaman's face that he was not particularly happy about the news he had just heard. As a result, the heroine still helped the writer find the straw, so at the moment the heroes walked holding it in their hands. And then, unexpectedly, the young man did not carry the straw to his new hut, but put it instead of a blanket for those who slept on the street, because it was much colder for them. Manhua did not understand this action, asking the writer why he gave all the straw to others, because he is a shaman, which means that it is much more important. Then Subai explained everything to the girl by saying that the lives of others are as valuable as his own. These words made the heroine think, so that she could not even say anything in response to this statement. At that moment, the heroine realized that the young shaman was not what she first thought, because his personality began to be revealed through his actions. And then someone started shouting to the entire settlement that the hunters had returned. And the hunters returned not empty-handed, but with prey, which greatly delighted everyone who was looking forward to them. Everyone was happy because they saw how much food the hunters were bringing for them. One child even ran up to the red-maned boar and said that the animal looked delicious. The adults, meanwhile, were happy that they would finally be able to feed the children. Then the young shaman asked the girl if food was shared among all the villagers. And then, because of this question, he remembered that he had not eaten anything for a whole day. Manhwa explained to the writer that, especially when it comes to meat, most of it goes to the totem warriors, and the leftovers are left for children and reserve warriors. The guy asked what the old people eat, and then the heroine said that they get food occasionally, and usually they eat wild fruits if they can find something. In addition, the tribe immediately eats only half of the prey, and we dry the other half so that they can eat while the hunters are away. The hero realized that the supply of food was entirely dependent on a small group of hunters and gatherers, and this depended entirely on luck. The young man asked Manhwa if her tribe was engaged in farming or animal husbandry, because this could provide the village with food. The heroine didn't even understand the words the writer said, and then added that they couldn't even feed themselves, let alone animals. The girl's statements led the new shaman into a dead end, because he did not know that everything was so bad in this settlement. Subai did not know how to explain to the girl that pigs can be raised so that they can be eaten later, and most likely, the poor pig will be quietly slaughtered and eaten on the very first night. And then a man who looked like a lion appeared next to the new monk, and he asked Manhwa who this guy was, because he was seen for the first time. Then the man wanted to guess who it was, and for this he even put down his prey, intending to find out everything in detail. A hunter unknown to the writer asked if the guy was the heroine's future husband, whom her father had found for her. Then Manhwa began to scold the man, calling him Uncle Censure, screaming because he said such nonsense, and even asked every day when the heroine would finally get married. It was then that they explained to the hunters that this was the heir of the shaman, which caused real surprise and delight among those who came, because they learned that hope for the survival of the tribe was not yet lost. And one of the hunters noticed that the heir was quite thin, so he needed to be fattened up, and therefore he was going to give the writer his entire catch. Everyone thought that their future depended only on him as the shaman's heir, so they tried in every possible way to make his life better. The hero asked Manhwa if all the guests in this settlement were treated as well as he was treated, and then the heroine asked why we should treat strangers this way, and they treat the young man this way only because he is a future shaman. Then a child began to tug at the young man's clothes, trying to attract attention to himself, and at the same time holding the bird, which he was looking at hungrily. It was clear that the child wanted to eat himself, but at the same time he told the writer that he wanted to share his food with him. And although Subai was touched by this, he understood that all this was being done only because he would soon become a shaman. When everyone had already left, closer to night, the guy stayed with Manhwa, and together they began to fry the prey over the fire. And then the girl asked why the writer did not accept the meat from that little boy, because with this action the shaman would have honored the child. The guy explained that there is no honor in this, because they are all people, and then added that it is better to fry the meat well. And the young man said this because he saw with what hungry gaze the heroine looked at the food, ready to pounce with the words that the prey was almost ready. Then the guy finally took the meat off the heat, because he realized that it was really ready to eat, so he didn't have to torment himself anymore. After this, the writer offered food to the heroine, because she still did not take her eyes off the cooked meat. However, the girl began to refuse, saying that she could not eat it, because it was meat for the shaman, not for her, so only the shaman himself could eat it. But Manhwa was too hungry to resist for long, so she began to reach out for food, saying that since Subai insisted, she could not refuse. And since the heroine has no choice, she will take the meat that the shaman offered her, but she will still have to eat it very quietly so that no one will find out. The young man could not stand it then and told the heroine to stop talking and take a bite already. Manhwa repeated the guy's words that she should only take a bite, trying to restrain herself. It was clear how hungry the heroine was, that while she was opening her mouth, she even began to salivate profusely. The young man began to notice the state of the girl at the moment, but the guy didn't have time to do anything, because Manhwa instantly approached him, shouting that she would bite off just a small piece. The young shaman at that moment felt insignificant before the girl's hunger. It seemed that, Together with the heroine, a whole hurricane hit the young man, which almost demolished him. Then Subai looked at the condition of the meat after Manhwa took a small bite, and the writer was very surprised at what he saw. After all, the heroine not only bit off almost the entire piece, but did not even leave a bone, having bitten off that too. Although the meat was harder than on the young man's land, it was not much. It was only a pity that there was no salt. When the heroine heard that the guy needed salt, she immediately began to rummage through her bag for some reason. Then the girl handed the young man something that was most likely salt. And the hero was not mistaken, there was indeed salt in the vessel, so he asked if it belonged to the heroine. Manhwa admitted that there was no salt left in the tribe, however, she just saved a little bit. The heroine explained that all totem warriors must eat salt, but since she is a reserve warrior, the young man does not have to worry about anything and eats in peace. It was then that the writer remembered that in the Stone Age salt was very valuable. In a past life he could easily buy a whole kilogram of salt in a store at an inexpensive price. After this, the shaman decided to refuse the offered salt, explaining that he thought and decided that he wanted to eat something simpler. But the girl still continued to insist that he not refuse, because she did not feel sorry for him. The heroine eventually took the salt back, saying that since the young man didn't want it, she would keep it for herself, and the writer, meanwhile, thought that this salt was a treasure for Manhwa, so he couldn't just use it. Subai began to think that the village he was in was most likely considered poor, so he needed to figure out what to do to solve the most pressing problems as quickly as possible. In the end, the guy decided to stop at mining salt, so he asked the heroine where her tribe gets salt. Then the girl said that the hunters go to another tribe, because every 15 days the Sikadir tribe opens a market, and people from neighboring villages go there to buy something. Subai then asked when the market would open next, and Manhwa replied that in 10 days. And while the guy was thinking about going to the market to learn more about this world, the heroine suddenly began to hide her face, as if trying to hide the fact that she was eating something. It turned out that the heroes were distracted from the dialogue by the girl's father, who came to them to inform the young man that the great shaman wanted to see him. Then the guy went to the hut, where he was chosen as the new shaman. The leader did not tell the young man why he was called, so he walked in ignorance while the man looked at his back. The commander, meanwhile, told others that the time would soon come for the great shaman to leave, and then everything would remain with Subai. And then the hunter answered him that he knew this, and that is why they were all gathered here now. It turned out that there were hunters near the hut, as if waiting for something. All those present had thoughtful faces, because everyone was thinking about what would happen to their tribe when the great shaman passed away. One of the hunters wore a hood, so it was not clear what kind of appearance this man had. And then, after the mysterious hunter took off his hood, it turned out that she was a beautiful girl. Everyone was thinking about what kind of shaman Subai would be, because no one knew what kind of person he was. And then a cry reached the hunters, which told the others to greet their new shaman, thereby attracting all the attention of those present. When the writer came to the great shaman's home, he informed the guy that the inheritance ceremony would take place tomorrow, and at the moment the old man was going to tell the young man everything he needed to know. After all, the time has already come, and we can't delay any longer, because the time of the great shaman is running out. Then the old man asked if Subai knew what it meant to be a shaman, and the young man honestly admitted that he didn't really, so the writer needed an explanation. This is how the writer learned that a shaman is one who protects the tribe, remembers its past and determines its future, and only by doing all this can one consider oneself a shaman. In their world, each tribe is based on the power of its totem. Each tribe has its own totems, and only a shaman can use their power, and only a shaman can awaken the bloody marks of totem warriors. But since the young man has not been in this world for so long, he does not know who the totem warriors are, so he asked the great shaman. It turned out that totem warriors are the strongest people in the tribe after the shaman. Each of the totem warriors has a lot of spiritual energy. Great power is hidden in the blood of each. But neither blood nor spiritual energy mean anything, because they cannot develop on their own. Without totem marks, it is impossible to control the power that lies hidden in the blood of a warrior, so it is very important that the tribe have a shaman. In other words, only a shaman can unlock the potential of warriors and give them strength that surpasses human power. Strength lies in the blood of everyone, therefore, with the help of training and education, even the weakest of people can be made into a totem warrior. The difference between ordinary, reserve, and totem warriors lies in the strength of their blood and spiritual energy. Having collected enough blood power, a person can go through a strengthening ritual performed by a shaman. As a rule, there are enough reserve warriors for battles with most animals. The tribe most of the time relies on them. But somewhere outside the villages there are animals whose strength is difficult to even imagine, and only totem warriors can fight with such animals. Although there are few of them, the tribe rests on them, and the strength of the tribe directly depends on the number of totem warriors. This is how the writer realized how important the role of the shaman is. Because as long as the tribe has a shaman, he can help people become totem warriors. And if you also take into account the dangerous times the tribe lives in, then the value of the shaman increases significantly. Here the old man added that the value of the shaman does not end there, because the hero will still be able to create shamanic amulets. After this, the shaman showed the young man a cloth in which various unknown objects were stored. There were also packages containing all the methods of creating shamanic amulets that are known to the great shaman. When the guy took one of the packages and looked inside, he didn't understand the letters, because this language was unknown to him. The letters began to move and glow in front of the young man's eyes, so he definitely couldn't read it. The writer simply looked at these unfamiliar letters and immediately got a headache. It turned out that the young man could not yet read shamanic texts, but after the inheritance ceremony they would have to be revealed to him. After this, the old man showed the guy a shaman's amulet, each of which had a magic rune drawn on it, and it could only be activated with the help of magic. The young man was very happy that the time for magic had come for him. Then the shaman decided to tell us more about magic, and began with the fact that magic comes in different forms. With the help of magic, you can create poisons that allow you to poison someone, and there is also magic that allows you to heal others. There are also blessing techniques that make people stronger and faster, and the like. The hero liked to hear about this, so he asked the shaman what he could do with this. Then the great shaman replied that he heals well and knows how to cast blessings. At least everyone thinks so. The young man guessed that he shouldn't talk about the shaman's abilities in order to avoid an attack. The great shaman was pleased that the one who noticed him was a smart guy, because he quickly understood everything. Shamans are highly valued by everyone, but they are an easy target for opponents, because if there is no shaman, the tribe will not survive. Then the old man showed a scroll that contains the ingredients to create amulets, and where to get them, so the young man must remember all this and keep it secret, because this is their heritage. The guy promised that he would engrave this knowledge on his heart so that he would remember and never forget, because it is very important. And then the great shaman began to cough heavily, and then the young man saw blood, guessing that the man was ill. The writer, without wasting a second, immediately jumped up to help the old man, telling him not to move while the young man treated him. After this, the young man used his healing ability. However, the treatment turned out to be ineffective, because his ability was not improved. Then the great shaman told the guy not to waste his strength, because there was no way to help the old man. Subai, meanwhile, did not understand why his treatment was not enough to help the great shaman. The man told the young man that he was very sorry that he would not see the miracles that the young man would create in the future, and then asked him to help him get up so that the shaman could tell the writer something else. The great shaman told the young man not to forget the knowledge that the old man had passed on to him, and to always remember what it was for. Then Subai promised that he would never forget all this knowledge and would take care of it, so the shaman need not worry about this. And since the great shaman has already told the writer all the information that he must know, then the inheritance ceremony can soon begin, because the guy is already ready. After this, the heroes left the great shaman's dwelling and went to the ceremony, where the entire tribe was already waiting for them. The old man told Subai to kneel down to begin the inheritance ceremony. Everyone watched this, without saying a word and even practically without breathing, afraid to miss even a second of such a significant event. The great shaman began his speech by saying that he had lived a long life of 63 years, so it was time to transfer the tribe to a new shaman. And since everyone is ready, then the inheritance ceremony can begin. Everyone began to scream enthusiastically, waiting for what would happen next, because everyone eagerly wanted to see everything with their own eyes. After this, the great shaman shouted that blood must be shed. The others took up these words and shouted them, following the great shaman. After these words, everyone raised their knives and made a cut on the inside of their palms, and the blood that flowed from people after the cut began not to drip down, but to fly in one direction, which looked magical. The great shaman collected this blood with the help of his magic, holding it in front of him while it accumulated. And then the old man shouted that the totem had appeared, meanwhile looking at the blood in front of him. It turned out that from all the collected blood, something resembling a tribal totem actually began to appear. And then this totem began to move, heading towards the guy, who was very surprised by this action, and even frightened a little. After this, the power of the totem seemed to inhabit Subai, who immediately felt it. The great shaman put his hand to his forehead and told the young man that he was now the true heir of the shaman. It turned out that the shaman put his hand to his forehead in order to take knowledge from himself and pass it on to the new shaman, saying that there is the whole truth about the history of the shaman and all the riches of the totem. After these words, the great shaman put his hand to the guy's forehead to convey all this knowledge to him. And then the young man found himself in a place in which, it seemed, he had already been. And then he remembered that he had ended up there that time when he first met the great shaman. And then a desert appeared before their eyes, along which several people were walking, who said that they needed to walk faster in order to hold out for a couple more days, and then they would have to get to the lands of their ancestors. And one of them said that it was very wants to eat, because he hasn't had a crumb in his mouth for 2 days. Among these people there was a little boy, from whom it was clear that he was also very tired and hungry. At night, when this boy was left alone, he knelt down and began to pray to the totem god. He asked God to allow the child to see the future of his tribe. After this, other people saw that something began to happen to the boy who had left them, and then a girl ran up to him, asking how much he had drunk of the poison of Providence, and then added that he seemed to have gone crazy to do this to himself. It turned out that this girl was a shaman, and she realized that the child had done something that should not be done, so he would not live long, and then someone added that this was a disaster, because they had lost the potential heir to the shaman. And then the guy turned to the girl, saying that he saw something, and then the shaman told the boy that he should be quiet, because this is a secret, because you cannot count on predictions, you just need to remember them. The boy asked his mother if she thought that the day would come when their tribe would become stronger, to which she replied that she did not know. After all, it has not yet been determined whether the tribe will be strong or not, because all this will happen in the future, so now it is impossible to say for sure. Then the girl added that she believed that the boy would give people food and shelter over their heads. These words made the boy smile, because it was nice that his mother believed in him so much. After this, the child closed his eyes and found himself in an unknown space, in which a door suddenly opened and a silhouette appeared. The boy survived, and as he grew older, he heard words that he was an overconfident shaman, because he was too weak, but he completely believed that he would do what he wanted. Once there was a case in the tribe when the shaman managed to injure dangerous animals, but did not have time to protect his child, who began to apologize to the shaman for not living up to expectations, so there was no point wasting energy on treating him. In the eyes of the great shaman, one could see how much he had experienced, and what a difficult path he had. All his life, the shaman's thoughts were that he could not give up, but must protect his tribe to the end. And so the writer was able to follow the entire life of the great shaman, right up to the moment when the old man met him. It was clear that this story touched the young man very much, because tears were rolling down his cheeks, and then he noticed that he had made the shaman wait for a very long time. Then the great shaman began to calm Subai, saying that there was no need to cry, because all this had long passed. The old man believes that he is not so important to shed tears for him, because the most important thing is only inheritance. While the shaman spoke, he drew lines on the young man, the meaning of which was known only to him. The shaman's hand abruptly released the young man's face, forcing Subai to pay attention to it. It turned out that the great shaman fell as soon as he drew symbols on the writer's face, and the guy then grabbed the old man by the hand, saying goodbye to him. The last thing the great shaman managed to say was that he left everything to the young man, and with a calm heart he then retired to his well-deserved rest. So the inheritance ceremony ended, and after some time the guy opens his eyes, as if after a long sleep. It turned out that Subai was not sleeping, but had lost consciousness, so he was taken to the place where he was now. The young man thought that now he understood how the shaman's totem works, because it is something like a shaman's chronicle, in which each shaman leaves his mark, and the main secret of the ceremony is the inheritance of the design. Now that the writer has become a full-fledged heir, his vision has improved and he began to see everything clearly, although before he was myopic, and it seems that the guy's body has become stronger. Then the young man decided to test his guesses by ordering the system to open the status window, where he added a mana reserve, the Yanlong totem, and the work added that he was now not just a writer, but also a shaman. Then Subai saw a note in which it was written that with the help of the ability you can heal other people, which will improve the owner's skills, and this will help the guy become a shaman with enormous power. But do not forget about the initial tasks. The young man was delighted that his endurance, strength and speed had more than doubled, and his spiritual strength had increased tenfold, and since so much had changed, the young man began to feel different. When Subai saw that the system said that his spiritual powers and mana reserves were equal, he realized that they were proportional, which meant that the mana reserve was obtained from spiritual powers, but the abilities obtained through the system relied directly on spiritual power's strength. That was all the guy wanted to know, so after that he got his prize. The writer received all the support kits that had not been received before, among which was a beginner's kit, which included a recipe for linen fabric. The young man realized that these sets could contain literally anything, so he wouldn't even be surprised if one day he received a pack of toilet paper. But flax fabric is a useful thing, because most people wear skins, and with the help of this knowledge he can create at least some clothes. And then someone from the street called the writer, first addressing him as Subai, and then corrected himself and called him a shaman, asking if he had woken up, to which the guy replied that yes. It was the chief who first apologized to the young man for disturbing him early, and then said that it was time for the young man to move to the main hut. Then the young man asked if the main hut was the one where the shaman lived. At this moment, the commander reminded that now it was Subai who was their shaman, so the tribe needed his orders. And then the young man realized that he had absolutely no idea what happened to the body of the old shaman, so he asked the leader. Another man appeared at the entrance, explaining that they had followed the advice of the old shaman, and therefore burned his body. And then the man extended his hand, which contained what was left of the old shaman. Then the guy asked if it was relics, and then thought that from a scientific point of view it was just a stone. But he did not know how different this world was from his previous one. But from the reaction of the men it was clear that they seemed to have heard about the relics for the first time, so they did not understand the young man and what he was asking about. Subai explained that there is a legend that a person who has lived his life with dignity and nobility leaves his relics after cremation, so the young man promised to preserve them so that after the return of the lands of his ancestors, they would build a temple where they would leave these relics. And this was just the beginning of plans for the tribe, because now they have a new shaman who is going to make people's lives better thanks to his knowledge. The guy decided to get to work right away because he understood that every second was important. So he asked the men how things were going in the tribe and how much meat they had in stock. It turned out that the tribe does not have much food, because there is barely enough for the totem warriors. But the main problem is to feed the 6 reserve warriors. The young shaman was surprised by the news that there were only 6 spare warriors in their tribe. Then the chief explained that there used to be more of them, 26. But most were captured by the totem warriors of the Black Snake tribe when they tried to escape. So now they are either dead or enslaved. The young man asked how far the Black Snake tribe was from them, because he needed to find out how serious a threat they pose. But Subai has no reason to worry about this, because the Black Snake tribe will definitely not reach them, because the lands in which they now live are deserted and barren, and their opponents do not like this. And there are almost no animals near the village, so hunting is very difficult, because it takes hunters a day to get to the place, and then 3 more for the hunt itself. Of course, this is bad, but there are also advantages, because although it is difficult to get food here, this also makes them not the highest priority target, which gives time for development. Then the young man realized that they could not rely on hunting alone, so they needed to figure out what they could sell at the market instead of food. And then the guy remembered that he had knowledge about flax, so he asked the men if they had ever heard of it. The hunters replied that, of course, they had heard about flax, which is considered something rare among them, because only large tribes make it, and one of the hunters admitted that since childhood he dreamed of getting linen clothes and leaving them to his children. They wanted to get more linen clothing, but after the resettlement they had very little dried meat, and therefore every time flax appears at the market of the spotted leopard tribe, it is immediately swept away, and 3 pieces of dried meat are asked for a bolt of flax. Then the shaman asked how much one piece weighed, because in his past world in ancient times it was calculated with approximately 55 kilograms of meat. Then the leader said that he would think about it now, and then asked Sangshur not to move. The commander showed the hunter how much is considered one piece for them. After this, the young shaman asked how much flax was in one roll, and then the commander asked Sangshur to lie down. Thus, the leader showed what the writer asked, explaining that one roll is the size of the door to the hunter. The young man calculated that for a meter of flax he needed to pay about 136 kilograms of dried meat, which was very expensive. And then Subai decided to start small, namely, first get more meat so that the tribe would forget about hunger. But instead of hunting, people somehow ended up in a field where there was most likely no chance of catching any large animal. And then one of the hunters asked their leader Sangshur why they don't hunt, but collect grass, because this is a waste of time. The leader, without thinking twice, ordered the curious hunter to shut up, because the future of their tribe depended on it. And all because the young shaman had previously told the others that he knew how to make fabric from flax, which delighted everyone. To the enthusiastic cries, the guy replied that everyone should keep their voices quiet and keep their heads down, because if someone finds out about this, then their tribe will be in trouble. After this, Subai asked the leader of the hunters that the next time he goes hunting, he would look for a plant, because fabric is made from it, so it depends only on the man whether their tribe will have enough food. Sangshur approached the work he received responsibly, because he did not expect that the shaman would entrust him with something so important. The writer, meanwhile, was thinking that the tribe's supplies of dried meat would last for 2 weeks, and the hunters would spend 3 days traveling there and 3 days hunting, and then another 3 days traveling back, so there would only be 5 days left to make the cloth. The young man was very worried, because there was little time, and Sangshur and Yanjiao might not find the materials. And even if they succeeded, the young man did not know what to do next, wondering whether he should tell everyone how to make linen fabric. The writer decided not to shine again, therefore, he personally certainly cannot do this, so he needs a suitable assistant, whom he himself will teach everything, and he, in turn, will teach the others. But the chance that everything will turn out badly cannot be missed either, so the shaman also needs to come up with a plan B. And we should not forget that the tribe has a lot of other problems, including the lack of drinking water, salt, and sanitation. There were too many troubles to solve, so just thinking about it all gave the young man a headache. The guy began to think that he was just a rider and was not able to take care of himself, so he was not sure that he could cope with an entire tribe. And then a guest came into the shaman's home, asking the guy what was happening to him. The girl saw that the young man was holding his head, so she began to worry about him, asking if he was sick. Then the heroine came close to the shaman, touching his forehead and asking if the guy was hot, and if it was hot inside his head. The writer sharply backed away and asked the girl what she was doing, and also why she was near his hut, because she could have been eavesdropping. At that same second, the heroine explained that she did not eavesdrop, but simply listened to the young man's conversations with himself, and did not even try to hide, and then added that her father and the others had gone hunting, so she was protecting their shaman with all her might. After this, the young man asked if the girl could really be trusted, because he wasn't so sure about it. The heroine replied that it doesn't matter, because the main thing is that she is certainly more reliable than the shaman who sits and holds his head, and besides, among the reserve warriors she is the strongest. The young man tried to calm the girl down, telling her that he had no time to fight with her, so he might be offended. Then, as soon as the girl let him go, the guy asked her if shamans always solve this whole bunch of problems on their own. The heroine replied that of course not, because shamans have assistants, so the young man asked where the previous shaman's assistants were, and if they wanted to help him. It turned out that during the attack of the Black Snake tribe, the assistants protected the shaman, and thus every single one of them died. Subai realized that the Black Snake tribe was trying to destroy the foundation on which the Yanlong tribe rested. If there are no more assistants to the old shaman, then you need to look for new ones. And then the young man asked the heroine if she had anyone in mind. The requirements for a shaman's assistant included that he must be smart in order to help the young man solve problems. Also, the shaman's assistant must be diligent, and have a fresh and healthy outlook on things. And then the girl said that Subai literally described her, so the guy could have directly said that he wanted to see her in the assistant's place, and there was no need to come up with a riddle. But the writer broke the heroine, telling her that she did not fit on any point, so she could calm down. The girl pouted at the young man's words, and then told him that in this case it would be better for him to choose Miko for himself. Then the shaman asked what it was. Manhwa explained that this is a woman who helps the shaman with housework, cleans houses, looks after the hearth and all that. So Miko is the one who takes care of everyday affairs instead of the shaman. And this is exactly what the young man was looking for, so he asked someone to advise him. It turned out that there was one girl who was suitable for this role, so Subai asked to take him to her in order to quickly see the one who could become Miko for him. And then Manhwa remembered how her father told her that sooner or later the shaman would look for Miko for himself, and since she had been with him lately, and therefore the leader believed that she would be ideal for this role. It was clear that the girl did not want to agree to this, but her father continued to claim that this was a great honor, so the heroine should not miss this opportunity. Manhwa knew that every girl dreams of becoming a Miko, but the problem is that her plans were only to take revenge on those who harmed her tribe, because no matter what, she was going to become a totem warrior and kill the bastards from the Black Snake tribe. And while the heroine was replaying this memory in her head, the young man tried to shout to her, but she did not react at all. The shaman asked the girl if they were going exactly in the right direction and how long it would be before they arrived, and then Manhwa said that they had already arrived, and then pointed her hand in the direction of someone's hut. The heroine said that her friend lived there, so she could call her, but the writer stopped her, saying that first he wanted to look at her himself, and then asked whether the applicant lived alone. And while the young man tried to look, Manhwa said that several girls live here together and work here. The young shaman nevertheless looked inside the dwelling, trying to find Manhwa's girlfriend with his eyes, and the guy still managed to find the one whom he was offered as Miko. The heroes began to watch the girl together, discussing her, and then Manhwa asked how she was with the shaman. The guy replied that the girl was very beautiful, but she looked so fragile that her tribal marks on her face were barely visible. Then the heroine explained that her friend was weak, but very kind and diligent. She was just a little stubborn sometimes. It turned out that Yuying is Tsengshir's niece, and her parents died when she was very young, so she was raised by her aunt. But recently her aunt became pregnant, so Yuying moved to this place, saying that she would not take a crumb more from them, because they needed it more. The guy noticed that the girl did the right thing, but Manhwa did not agree with him, because in Uncle Tsengshir's house there is always meat, and in this place, at best, she would get the roots. And then Subai explained that there is a big difference between receiving and giving, so he understands the girl and her action. The hero remembered his childhood, and then decided that Yuying just wanted to put his thoughts in order. But other girls shared Manhwa's opinion, telling Yuying to return to Uncle Tsengshir, because she won't find anything good here, and they also have a new shaman, and the heroine's parents used to be totem warriors, so she can definitely serve the shaman. But Yuying just waved it off, saying that their revered shaman would definitely not like her, so she wouldn't make a Miko. However, others continued to tease her, saying that if she missed this opportunity now, she would regret it for the rest of her life. And then the girl agreed that maybe she would like to be Miko a little, but she was too unsure of herself. And then the heroine added that, in her opinion, Manhwa is more suitable for this place, because when they were children, she constantly said that she wanted to become Miko. The young shaman heard these words of the girl, so he turned towards Manhwa with a silent question, and then guessed that both friends wanted to be Miko. And then Manhwa couldn't stand it, and burst into her friend's room shouting that Yuying should not tell such things to everyone, to which Tsengshir's niece replied that her friend herself had told this to everyone she met before, so it was not a big secret. And then the girl also noted that Manhwa had been eavesdropping. Then the young shaman stood up for the girl, explaining that they were not eavesdropping, but watching, because the guy asked Manhwa to bring him here. Yuying began to get nervous, because she realized that the shaman heard her every word, and how presumptuous it was to say that she wanted to become Miko, because she was completely useless. So the girl was already thinking about how she would leave here and find a place where no one knows her. And then the writer told the girl that he wanted to ask her something, understanding that the assistant must have at least basic knowledge. Therefore, the young man asked Yuying if she could write, confident that people had already reached this level of development. But this question surprised everyone present, who began to ask the shaman if he could write, which was surprising. Then the girl apologized and replied that, unfortunately, she couldn't write at all. The young man asked Yanhua if this was some kind of wrong question, and then she explained that only large tribes have their own written language, and their tribe is not one of them. In this case, Subai immediately got down to business, asking Yuyin if she was ready to become a Miko, because her friend praised her very much, and the guy decided to avoid other questions, because he has no idea what the tribe's level of development is. Yanhua added that her goal is to avenge their ancestors and become a totem warrior, so the girl thought for a long time and realized that her friend was more suitable for this role than anyone else. Besides, Yuying herself wanted to become a Miko all her life. But the girl continued to doubt, so the shaman tried to reassure her that she did not need to worry about what others would think. And then Yuying explained that the fact is that she is shy, stupid and often makes mistakes. The writer stopped persuading the girl and began to get up, preparing to leave. Since Yuying doesn't want to, the guy decided not to force her, because the final decision was only hers. And although the girl tried to stop Subai, he never returned, telling Yanhua that it was time for them to go. Yanhua followed the young shaman, asking him why he ran away so easily and quickly. Yuying is very shy and fragile, so it was unclear why the guy treated her so cruelly. Because if he left her like that now, she would hate herself and think that she was useless. Then the young man asked the heroine why she decided that he left her friend. After all, a person must grab opportunities on his own, and one cannot force him. So if she wants to become Miko, she must overcome her weaknesses and grab the bull by the horns. Subai explained that the girl herself would be better off because she would achieve what she wanted. And then the heroes saw a silhouette running after them, waving its hand to attract attention. Yanhua began to hope that it was her friend who gathered strength, and decided to catch up with the shaman. However, when the person approached, it became clear that it was not Yuying, but another girl who ran to express her respect to the shaman by giving him something. Then the writer felt that he expected too much from the girl, so he told Yanhua that it was time for them to move on. But at that moment, the girl who came running asked the shaman to wait. Because Yuying also ran with her, the girl was just very weak and ran slowly. After these words, everyone saw another silhouette approaching them, although not very quickly, and this time Yuying herself was already running, and it was clear that she was very tired from running. As soon as the girl reached it and caught her breath, she confidently shouted to the young shaman that she wanted to become Miko. Although the girl looked confident when confessing, after that she still showed her fragility and began to cry, and her friend began to calm her down while Subai smiled in the background. Yanhua told Yuying to stop crying, because the shaman had already decided that she would be Miko, so there was no point in shedding tears. And then the new Miko explained that these were tears of happiness, because she didn't even dare to dream about this, and therefore she is now very happy. However, Yanhua was worried that Miko's test was too simple, so she didn't know if everything would be fine. And then the guy explained that he couldn't give the girl an obstacle course with riddles to see if she could become Miko, because he already saw that she was suitable for the role of the shaman's assistant. After this, the friend began to laugh at Yuying for the fact that when she cries, she looks like a cat, and this amused her very much. The young shaman understood that there would be no problems with two friends, but then he thought that at least they were both beautiful. When young Miko calmed down, the young man told her to wash her face before starting work, to which the girl replied that they had very little water, so she couldn't waste it on something like that. The guy noticed how much the offer to wash his face surprised the girls, who were not used to washing their faces so easily, and this, in turn, amazed the young man, who forgot how bad hygiene was in the tribe. And then the young shaman asked his friends how much of a part of this tribe they even wash themselves. Yanhua said that they are rinsed often. For example, she does it once a year during the rainy season. Although the shaman knew that they rarely washed, he didn't think that much. Subai asked himself the question of what kind of creature had been with him since coming to this world, and then he thought that the smell of the others in the tribe was better than his sense of smell, so they probably just got used to the smell so that he didn't interfere. After this, young Miko asked the young man if it was so important how often they washed. Naturally, this is important, so something needs to be done about the local unsanitary conditions, which means that they need a stable source of water, and in the future they will need water for irrigation. Subai asked the girls where the tribe usually gets water, and they told him that to the southeast of the village there is a small lake, but there are many very strong animals around it, so only totem warriors go there, who collect water and carry it, so the tribe just enough to quench your thirst. Then the guy asked to show him the way, because water is the source of life, so we need to deal with the problem of its absence. And at that moment the heroines grabbed the shaman, detaining him, and then explained that he should not leave the village, because it was too dangerous outside. While the young man was trying to prove to the girls that there was nothing dangerous there, he was already thinking at that moment that he had been put under house arrest. It turned out that some totem warriors are expelled from the tribes, so they wander through the wastelands until they stumble upon some small tribes, and then they shamans and force them to perform an inheritance ritual. And this even happened with the shaman of one tribe, because when they found him, he was completely exhausted and eventually died. The young man learned that because of this, the shaman was strictly forbidden to leave the tribe if the situation was not out of the ordinary. And then Subai remembered the words of the old shaman that this work was dangerous and difficult. Manhwa added that it is dangerous for the guy outside, but in the village nothing threatens him, because the totem warriors are divided into two groups, so an ordinary exile cannot get close to the village. First, the shaman reminded himself that there were 11 totem warriors in the tribe, 6 of them hunted, and the other 5 guarded the village, and then the young man thought that continuing to extract water in this way was a waste of time and effort, so first he needed to somehow solve the water problem. And so Subai began to resist, shouting to the girls to let him go, because they needed to find water, and since they were so worried, then the leader could go with the guy. But it turned out that the leader still had not returned, and going out in search of him was no less dangerous, especially since before leaving, the father gave Manhwa instructions not to let the shaman out. But the guy continued to insist that water is very important, because their lives directly depend on it, so the heroines gave up. Thus, the heroes all went together in search of water, and Manhwa said that she would protect the shaman at the cost of her life. And then young Miko added that if a wild beast appears, then let the others run away while he eats her. And then the friend reminded Yuying that they were not far from the tribe, so the hunters must cope with the animals. All this time, a mysterious silhouette was following the unsuspecting heroes. The shaman was currently worried that they might get lost and step into a dangerous zone. Manhwa, meanwhile, continued to promise that the hunters should be nearby at this time, and they not only patrol and transport water, but also spend a lot of time hunting. And then the heroes noticed a figure in the distance that began to approach them at high speed. They tried to find out who it was, but the silhouette did not answer their questions about who he was. Some shadow flashed over the head of the young shaman, who immediately thought that it was an exiled one, and then it turned out that there was not one person walking next to them, but 2, whom the heroes were able to see at the moment when the silhouette stopped. And then Manhwa recognized Hong and Black Fang in the strangers, and at that moment the shaman managed to discern the power of the totem warriors. As soon as Sister Hong released Black Fang, he asked the guys why they were outside the village, and then added that they should quickly return back. The young shaman explained that he did not want to return home, because he wanted to see the source of water, and then asked the man why he was alone on the road leading to the village. Black Fang then replied that Mai was injured, so he needed help urgently, or he would die. Then Subai ordered that he be quickly led to someone who needed his urgent help. The leader, meanwhile, told Mayman to hold on, because Black Fang had already run for the amulets, so they must help him. The wounded man replied that he would not last that long, so it was better for the others to leave him, because very soon the animals would come running to him, smelling the smell of his blood, and then asked the Flaming Horn to give his share of the meat to his son Mai Mao, who would definitely have to become a totem warrior. And then the leader noticed that since Mayman had enough strength to talk, he would definitely hold out. At that moment, the men, waiting for help, heard some rustling in the bushes. Therefore, the hunters rushed to defend themselves, but it turned out that they had attacked Black Fang. Shahan also ran out of the trees after him and was able to repel the hunter's blow. When the leader saw everyone who came after Black Fang, he was very surprised. And after that, the commander began to scold the hunter for being asked to bring shamanic amulets, and not the shaman himself, because these places are too dangerous. And then Subai explained that he himself wanted to come to this place, because he knows how to help, and after that the guy noticed that the wound was very serious, and ordinary people could not stand it. After this, the leader ordered the others not to interfere while the young shaman tried to save the hunter. The girls, meanwhile, were surprised at the young man's confidence, because they knew that it takes at least 30 days to learn magic, and he also casts spells without words, which they saw for the first time. Then the commander thought that the old shaman was right, because Subai was very talented. The young shaman, meanwhile, was thinking that his healing power was working, but the recovery speed left much to be desired, which meant that the first level of treatment was clearly not enough, so he decided to use it several times. The injured hunter was shocked that not a trace remained of his large wound. The others decided that the wounded man was very weak and therefore needed to be taken to the village, but he himself said that he was still able to fight. Then the shaman told Mayman to watch his beak, because while he was here, the others would not be able to protect the shaman. Meanwhile, the heroines surrounded the rider, asking him how he was feeling, to which he replied that he was just a little tired, but in fact, after 3 treatments, he felt as if his soul was about to leave his body. After this, the guy saw that in the system his healing skills increased by 9 points, and then he asked the system how he could regain his strength, and they advised him to rest or take some medications. And then Subai asked the leader how Mai got injured, because he flies so high and powerfully, and he is also very powerful. It turned out that while on patrol he was attacked by several dead timber wolves, and these are hybrid animals, so although their bodies are not particularly strong, they can shoot bone darts, which are difficult to defend against. Manhwa pointed out to the guy that even one of the strongest junior totem warriors was in danger, but Subai himself believed that he was not, which was a mistaken opinion. The young man was not used to the fact that in this world there are not only ordinary wild animals, but also great animals that only strong totem warriors can fight. Each great beast is special, and they are divided into 3 categories, which include mixed beasts, primordial beasts, and ancient beasts. Totem warriors also come in 3 levels, and in their tribe, Yanjiao, Sangshir, Mayman, Shahan and Qingyan have reached the top of the lowest level. Upon reaching the peak, a junior totem warrior becomes a medium totem warrior. The guy understood how his strength developed, but it was not clear to him what the difference in strength was between totem warriors of different levels. It was clear how great the difference was between a junior totem warrior and an ordinary soldier. And while Subai was pondering the new information, the leader ordered Shahan and Black Fang to help him escort the shaman to the village. And then the young man said that he would not leave until he saw the source, because he must find out more information about it for the sake of the tribe. To which the commander replied that this was very dangerous, because there were too many animals and too few of them, so they would not be able to protect Subai. But the rider did not give up, saying that the water problem urgently needed to be solved. The shaman explained that his safety was not as important as the lives of those living in the Yanlong tribe. When the leader saw how much the guy wanted to help the others, he agreed to his request. And then the commander shouted that they would have to protect Subai at any cost if something happened. It turned out that it was not so easy to get to the source, so, although the young man's strength was twice that of a human, he was already tired. The story repeated itself of how the rider's ascent to the mountain was ridiculed by junior schoolchildren, because again almost no one looked tired. But the guy was not the only one who lost all his strength, because his Miko also found it difficult to rise up. But it turned out that the girl was carrying fruits with her, which she found along the way and decided to collect them, so Subai looked the weakest in any case. And then the leader ordered everyone to stop, because they had finally reached the right place. Having reached the reservoir, the heroes saw tree wolves, which made the shaman's veins shake because of their eerie appearance. And then the leader said that while the tree wolves could still be dealt with, the stone crocodiles living in the lake were the real problem. The stone crocodiles turned out to be primordial animals, so they became the masters of the lake, because there are more than a dozen of them there. It is impossible to defeat crocodiles, so people simply collect water at those moments when crocodiles crawl onto land to sleep. And then the shaman said that it was too dangerous, so we had to use our animal mind. After this, the shaman added that finding a solution is not so difficult, because they will dig. The guy noted that this lake is a natural pool that can hold water, and it is fed by groundwater and surface runoff. And if they manage to make a canal somewhere in the lowlands, near the lake, then they will be able to provide the village with water, and people will no longer have to worry. Then one of the friends said that she did not understand anything, and the second explained to her that they would have to dig a ditch. Black Fang stepped forward and said that he was ready to dig if necessary. The shaman asked the man if he was feeling well, because he had recently been attacked, and Black Fang replied that everything was fine, although his head was spinning. Remembering the attack on Black Fang, Subai asked the leader why they attack by sound without hesitation, because this way they can kill one of their own. The captain explained that they have something to fear, because in the wildlands they are no different from animals, because they are either hunters or food. Especially at night, when animals are better oriented, attacking first is an instinct that makes people more likely to survive, and warriors often fight with each other, so it's better to get a couple of wounds in a training battle than to die because of a beast. In addition, there are much fewer of them than before, so hunters should be careful. The writer apologized to the leader, saying that he was wrong, because he did not know such information before, but the man opened his eyes. While the others were talking, White Fan had already begun to dig, shouting for everyone to watch as best he could. The shaman tried to calm the hunter, telling him that the guy had not even said where they would dig, because first they had to go down to the lowland. Each took on a specific role. For example, Yuying will help Black Fang to dig in the right direction, and Yanhua will help the shaman get rid of the grass. While Yanhua was doing her part, Subai suddenly froze in one place. It turned out that the writer was thinking that a trained warrior was immediately visible, because the girl had very pumped buttocks. Miko reported to the guy that the ground in the place where Black Fang was digging had become wet, which meant that he was approaching a water source. The young man began to think that things were going too well, as if he had forgotten something, and then everyone heard some noise, so they immediately ran to understand what had happened. It turned out that the noise was made by a bear, which did not look ordinary, because it was too strong. The shaman asked why the animals began to fight, and then they explained to him that if someone used the source for their own purposes, and other animals did not allow this, then a fight would begin. And crocodiles with stone armor do not participate. They will be better off hunting if the losing side is injured. Then the young man began to think that if the canal was excavated, it would soon be occupied by wild animals, while the water would contain not only their saliva, but also feces. Therefore, Subai stopped all work, explaining that the ditch would be more useful to animals than to people. Afterwards the young man added that they would not abandon the idea, and then asked if there was bamboo somewhere nearby, because they would need it. When the others did not understand what bamboo was, they had to explain that it is a plant that is solid on the outside and hollow on the inside. Yanhua said that they don't have bamboo, but there are 3 plants that fit the description, which include hollow tree, red bone tree, and heartless grass, and only hollow wood can be found in their area. When the shaman was asked why he needed this tree, he replied that the benefits from it would be immeasurable, but he would have to put in a little effort. After all, they will need wood in order to make a primitive plumbing system. Therefore, the heroes went to get trees that would help them a lot. While the leader was breaking down the trees with his own strength, the shaman was waiting nearby for the completion of the work. After this, the young man went up to the tree to examine it, and saw that the epidermis was very dense, and the thickness and tensile strength were remarkable. The guy explained that this tree is a real pipe made for them by nature. Then the leader admitted that he still did not understand what the shaman was going to do with this log. And then a girl called the heroes, saying that Black Fang had found water. Subai told the leader to take the log and bring it to the others, and the writer would explain the plan later. When everyone gathered together again, they saw that Black Fang had actually managed to dig a moat with water. The young man was glad that groundwater had been found, and thought to himself that this was his first time doing this, because before he had only seen this in films. The heroes could not believe that they had actually managed to dig up water, and the young man, meanwhile, was thinking that if they tried to build an aqueduct, the animals would instantly break it, so he decided that he needed to make a reservoir. Yanhua shouted that if water can be dug up with millet, then it can be done right in the village, to which her friend replied that if it worked like that, the shaman would immediately order it to be done in the village. Subai explained that water is not available everywhere, and the village is not located in the best way, because there are no trees nearby, which means there is no water either. The leader continued to ask why they needed the tree after all, because he didn't understand at all, and then the guy explained that they would use the tree to pump out water. If water gradually accumulates in the tank, it will overflow and the water will begin to spread out. But if they dig a hollow tree into the tank, then the water will flow through its empty core. Thus, the shaman wants to dig a lot of logs until the water reaches the village, and so they will have water. Hearing this, the heroes began to praise the young man for coming up with such good ideas. Yu still didn't understand how the water stayed in the tank and didn't go into the ground. The writer explained everything by saying that the hydrostatic pressure in the lake is high, but in the hole it is low, so that a little water seeps into the ground. And then the young man thought that the things he learned for the sake of his books were useful to him in life. When the young man looked at the girls, he noticed that they did not understand a word of what he was saying, so we could stop there. And since there were no more questions, it was time for the team to get to work. Subai ordered the others to collect branches and grass, because it was necessary to cover the tank from the animals. And after that, Yanhua and Black Fang would have to stay at the tank to keep an eye on the water. And the guy asked the leader to accompany him to the village, because the young man also had orders for the other residents. In the village, the young shaman announced to everyone that if they try, they will solve the water problem in the coming days. The writer began to give orders, saying that the work of the totem warriors would be taken over by the reserves, and Mayman would remain in charge. Shakhut and the rest of the totem warriors will guard the road to the lake at this time, and the rest will have to drive away all the animals so that they do not interfere with the work. The fire horn will be responsible for the supply of trees, and the singing frog will connect them, and the root should go downward, so that water flows to the village. Then the shaman was asked how to connect the trees, because they do not cling, and the water flows out. Subai drew what shape the logs should be in order for them to be connected to each other. This made me again admire the shaman who comes up with such unusual solutions. Thus passed 2 days of hard work, in which all the villagers took part, and the people's work was not in vain, because water finally poured out of their homemade pipe. Everyone was happy, because thanks to the shaman there was now water in the village. The screams of people were heard by young Miko, who was with Subai at that time. She told the young man that the villagers were very grateful to him, because he had helped them a lot. To which the guy replied that the residents themselves were great, because they worked so hard that they finished everything faster than he thought. And then the young man told Yuying that he wanted a new rule to appear in the tribe, and then the girl asked which one it was. At this moment, the young shaman smiled mysteriously, as if he knew what effect this rule would have. The guy told his Miko that they would have to drink a lot of hot water. After this, an order was announced throughout the village that residents would have to boil water before drinking it. But people didn't understand why to do this, because it's complicated and time-consuming, and there's no point in it. Then Yuying explained to everyone that there are invisible, small bugs in the water, so they need to boil the water to kill them. However, many still thought that this was complete nonsense, because if a shaman sees something that others do not see, it means that he simply sees ghosts. Even the shaman said that there was nothing in the beetles, because in times of famine they ate them on purpose, and nothing terrible happened. And then Miko continued to try to convince the others, talking about some person who was vomiting and had a fever for a week because of these bugs in the water. But everyone continued to ask the girl, saying that she believed in some nonsense, and then she realized that she was weak for such disputes. And then the heroine remembered that she was Miko, so she needed to be strong so that the shaman would not be disappointed in her, and then she told the others not to make noise and listen here. Then Yuying added that the shaman himself told her that people may not understand this, but he does not wish them harm, so anyone who disobeys the order will take care of himself, and the shaman will not be to blame for this. These words were able to convince the residents, because they began to remember cases when people actually died from diarrhea, which could be caused by dirty water. Subai himself was glad that the popularization of boiled water was in full swing. The guy asked the heroine if she had told people that they would have to wait until the water cooled down and not drink boiling water, and she gave a positive answer. The young man thought that since he did not know how to increase the population, he would focus on reducing mortality, and then he would need to provide everyone with food and sanitation. And then the young man nevertheless noticed that Yuying was doing something incomprehensible to him in his home. Therefore, Subai asked his Miko what she was doing, to which the girl replied that she was laying straw, because she needed somewhere to sleep. It was unexpected that the heroine, it turns out, arranges a sleeping place for herself. Yuying explained to the young man that Miko should live with the shaman, and then she thought that Subai did not want this, since he was asking. The guy replied that it wasn't that he was against it, he was just worried about one point that he started to talk about, but faltered. Meanwhile, the only thing in the young man's thoughts was that he was very afraid that he would not be able to restrain himself, but he still did not tell Miko about this. Night fell, and the rider could not fall asleep, so he just lay there, not moving, and then Tsubai asked the girl if they really needed to lie so close, because it embarrassed him very much. Then the heroine replied that it was necessary, because even though she was not very strong, she could definitely give him a couple of minutes to escape if something happened. The young man thought that it was Yuying who needed to run away from him, and then he remembered that tomorrow there was a lot of work, so he needed to try to sleep. Therefore, the rider began to count the sheep, among which a sheep with the face of Yanhua appeared. Because of this, the guy started thinking about the girl, and then he remembered how strong her buttocks were. The young man himself felt unpleasant about what he was thinking about, so he tried to drive all unnecessary thoughts out of his head. There was no way the guy could kick Yuying out, because if the shaman kicked Miko out, then they would definitely laugh at her, and Tsubai didn't want that. The shaman decided that since he couldn't sleep, he would spend time pumping up his healing. He is not going to ask anyone, so he will train on himself, because he must be ready for anything, and therefore he is obliged to increase the level of treatment. The young man began with a small cut on his finger, because you always need to start reading small. Tsubai then applied the treatment, beginning to develop it to save lives in the future.